I'm back. What's up, my friends and fam? Oh, it's not my channel. Oops.
We can be on your channel. I'll be on your channel. What's up, friends and fam?
Welcome back to another podcast. Today, I'm joined with Chris. It's been a long day, guys.
You can do this, Alan. Don't worry. You're learning it step by step.
One-man production band.
I feel that way as a developer, actually. I've had to learn like everything end to end. It's tough.
But that's, I mean, you basically have to do that. Especially since you're doing your own thing, too.
My startup, yeah. I love it, but then I'm also like, I need to like build teams, you know? I can't do everything myself.
So this is an interesting question. Do you feel like the type of learning you did at Amazon is different than the type of learning you do now?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think it's like more or less? Is it like width or depth? Or like, can you explain? Like,
I'll explain. I'll do my best to explain that.
Okay.
So definitely at Amazon, I grew as an engineer. Okay. And there's no way I could have grown as fast as I did if I wasn't rubbing shoulders with all these other engineers who knew what they were doing. And some of them who were willing to teach me and some of them who were really good at what they do. That was the key thing, too. They have to be actually good at what they do because then they teach you how to be good. I remember one engineer who I sat down with like when I was still green bean fresh out of college. And basically, he was like, I consider him like a virtuoso pianist on the keyboard because he's just like, and you see all this stuff happening on the screen. You have no idea what he's doing, but it's like somehow the code's working and like it's just like magic. Mm-hmm. But because he sat down next to me or I sat down next to him and I could just stop him and ask him like, hey, what did you just do there? Can you explain it to me? Like, why did you do that and all stuff? I could start to pick it up too and learn it. And then once I started learning a little bit, I could learn more on my own, right? Start mastering more and more, and it enabled me to also like start being not to his level probably, but to get more and more as good as he was at something so simple as like using your IDE to program, which is an integrated development environment, right? That's where you do your coding. There's another engineer who was more of the theoretical type, but theoretical in the best sense of the word. Like he understood the discipline of programming intellectually as a discipline so well that he could kind of like teach me things that I wouldn't have learned otherwise because he knew what he was doing. He wasn't just going through the motions. He had that deeper understanding. And he taught me stuff about design patterns, taught me about leadership principles at Amazon and how to succeed in that sense. And just always ready to kind of like, hey, let's take a break and like, I'm going to go show you, I'm going to teach you something at the whiteboard and just kind of go dive really deep into those things. And he's still a friend who's willing to do that for me today. So I really appreciate that. He's a research scientist now, like an applied scientist at Amazon. And so those are some examples, some of those engineers and others who, because you rub shoulders with them, you just like learn so much. Because you're working with them and they have to teach you as a part of the job, basically. So that's one example. Now, being an entrepreneur, you don't have any of that.
Right.
Who's teaching you? Like,
Google.
Yeah, Google. You can have mentors, but even mentors are not the same, really, because they're not in your shoes. They're not working with you side by side every single day, rubbing shoulders with you, trying to figure out the same problems that you are. There's a completely different kind of learning that happens in that kind of case. And so some of it you have to initiate on your own, which means that it takes kind of that courage to just like, I'm just going to do it and I don't have any idea what I'm doing and learn as I go. Some of it is like a lot of reflection. Like you have to stop and actually like think about what is it that just happened? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And what is my real goal? And like, like it doesn't make sense. Like you actually have to stop and like figure it. You have to almost like coach yourself, pay attention to like what's going on in your own life. And I think that if anything, my journey has made me kind of confront how weak I actually am.
Like humility kind of.
Humility in the sense not of being humble, but in the sense of like, yeah, that is actually like how weak I actually am. Like it's just like, yep, it's like, nope, this is not gonna cut it, you know?
Or maybe another way to phrase it is how much you need or how much grace you need from God.
How much grace I need from God. Yep. Morally, like sin and stuff like that, as well as like courage, right? To step out and do things and hard work and motivation and like, all these things that, because you're in a different environment at the workplace and you're getting paid well and everything, you have all these colleagues and you're respected. It's easy to kind of like feel pretty good about yourself and do good work. And then when you're kind of taken out of that context, that support networking context, you just realize like how destitute you are and like you can do stuff, but that whatever you do, like it doesn't feel like it makes much of a difference because it's like one small piece of like this massive thing that has to happen. Right. And you just realize how dependent you are on God's grace, which you always were dependent on, but it just becomes so much more obvious because all the supports are gone. If that makes sense. And then so one good thing has been, and this is God's grace. Like I feel like it's so hard to find people who really get you and can kind of give you good feedback and stuff. And God's given some of that along the way. But there's these times where there's these moments of insight that I don't know where they come from. I believe they come from God. Sure. Of what God's showing me so obviously to myself, like, Chris, this is who you are and what you're like right now. And this is how you need to change. And it's like, wow, where did that come from? Like, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Mm.
And yet it's exactly what I needed to hear. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's right. And then it's funny because it's almost like an intuition where it's like, I notice a certain pattern in my life that keeps happening. And then I look back at it and I'm sort of like, I think there's a reason why that kept happening. And what I felt like, frankly, was like, God's not letting me run away from my problems.
Oh, you gotta face them.
He's making me confront them. He's not letting me run away. Like, I thought I could just deal with it in the small way. I could avoid it,
You
and I
just
could
deal with it over time.
Yeah, I was doing it over time. Or it's like I'll just focus on the other stuff instead because it's more important anyway.
Sure.
But the problems that keep coming up and stuff, and it's like, oh, he's not letting me run away from these things. Like he's like a coach that's basically making me like, nope, you got to do that, you got to do that, you got to do that, and teaching me to confront reality instead of become depressed or implode or hide or just numb myself with
Whatever.
binge watching something or whatever. So that was like, that's how like I think that God was working in my life in Amazon also, but it's just become that much more obvious because there's nothing else that I could point to that would reveal these things to me except for Him. And then the things I'm learning are different too. Like I'm so grateful for Amazon. Why? One reason is that it taught me how to learn technical stuff.
Okay.
So it made me less scared of technical stuff and less intimidated by it. So I can just like go ahead and dive in and like figure it out. And that's been important for the technical work that I continue to do to this day.
Confidence,
the professional confidence,
and kind of like the know how to like the ability to learn kind of thing.
Yes, all these dots that have to connect, and like now you're not afraid of the stuff you don't know because you'll know how to figure it out basically to bring it together. But there are other things that Amazon did not teach me that I had to kind of confront. Things that have more to do probably with partnership and business and
more of the entrepreneur side.
More of the entrepreneurial side. Okay. It's just a mix. But I'm just so grateful for the way that God is, weaving everything together. The stuff that I see, the stuff I don't see. Amazon, outside of Amazon. He has a purpose, and it takes time to see the bigger picture about what he's doing.
Yeah. So one question I had as you were talking is there a difference between developing as an engineer versus developing as a programmer? Are they kind of synonymous? Do they share like attributes, or is it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't
actually, maybe first, like, how do you define both of them?
I think a programmer is somebody who programs. That's pretty obvious, right? Yeah. An engineer is someone who builds engines. I'm just going to play with the words a little bit.
Sure, okay. Literal definition.
Yeah. A programmer by trade is somebody who can program, basically somebody who can make a program that the computer can execute and do basically what you want it to do. Right? That basically is the skill of programming. Now you can become a master programmer, which I think has its own skills, which have to do with basically the elegance of your program, your ability to express your concept in a way the computer understands succinctly, and in a way that another human being who looks at it will just get it instantly. And there's an intuition where it's like, oh, that's beautiful. And then your ability to structure your code in such a way that it's very modular. And so it's very flexible because the requirements of a program change over time. And so a really skillful programmer is able to build a program in a way that they know they can always adapt it to do what it needs to do in the future. So it's not too brittle. It's not too stuck doing one thing. Engineering, I mean, in its technical definition in the past, I think it was oftentimes viewed as applied science, right? So taking scientific knowledge that's been rationally discovered through the scientific method and applying it through certain principles with rigor to engineer something. So you have civil engineers who build bridges using the principles of physics and statics and all those other things that they learn. And then you have like aerospace engineers who build planes using all the knowledge that they've accumulated from science and applying it into a body that can fly, and so on and so forth. So when I said the word engineers build engines, the way that I characterize it is that what's special about an engine in the modern sense, I guess, is that we can depend on that. It's so refined and robust that we can like depend on it. We can put in 100,000 cars and we trust that it's going to be okay. You can have a bridge that's going to support I don't know how many 10,000 tons of weight every single day, and you trust it that it will hold. And so with software engineering is the ability to build something with such reliability, efficiency, and scale that you can depend on it and you can build upon it something really weighty. And in that sense, it's a different discipline than programming, because so much more goes into engineering. How about all the hardware that you use? How do you engineer your architecture so that if some of the hardware fails, the service still is alive, right? So that, Amazon, Google, Facebook, whatever, they have tons of hardware that's failing. Hard drives fail, computers fail, whatever, network cards fail, all this stuff is failing. And yet the service is still alive and it can still serve billions of requests per second or whatever. That's engineering work there. That's not programming work anymore. And then when I build like, the pods or whatever, right? How do we get it to support 30, 100, 500 clients wirelessly connected to that? That's not really a programming issue, although you might have to program to work some stuff out.
Right.
A lot of it's an engineering issue of repeated iteration and testing in different environments, so it has the reliability and rigor that lets you depend on it in any environment. Take it out to the jungle, with no internet out in Papua New Guinea or whatever, it'll still work. If you use it in a classroom in America, it will still work. Like that's engineering. So engineering, I would consider a little bit of a step above just programming, although there's still programming has its own hierarchy, which has to do with that what I mentioned. Like you can have a really basic program that, a beginner would write, and a really elegant thing that expresses this powerful idea that a computer can process so succinctly and really flexibly, so you can keep changing it. Now, as you move to that flexibility side, now you're reaching more of the engineering aspect of things. So like scale, what does it mean for software to be scalable? One of the things it means is that over time, as it grows and as the number of things depend on it grows, it's flexible enough that it can address those new things. So what does it mean to have software that's maintainable? It means that as things change, you're able to make the changes you need to the software without fear of breaking anything else. So that's how you start making that transition from just a programmer towards an engineer. If that makes sense. It's like now you're dealing with software on a whole nother level, software evolution over time to continue to meet the needs of customers as those needs change. That's a little bit of a higher, meta level question of software engineering, as opposed to just the act of programming itself.
Because you're thinking on another level at that point, because it's no longer like, is this working or is this not? Because I think that's kind of like a lower level question a programmer might have.
That's the first level of a programmer, right? It's like, does the program do what I want it to do? That's the most basic question you can ask. Yeah. So let's say you wanted to build an AI for tic-tac-toe. Yeah. The most basic thing is that you create. I don't even know if this is the most basic thing. This is the worst possible thing. Sure. You do a bunch of if-else statements for every possible case, and then you tell it what to do in each case. That's still programming. Yeah. That's a very brute force rudimentary program.
Because there's only finite combinations for.
Yeah. So you can do it for tic-tac-toe. Exactly. But then if you take it one step, but here's the beautiful thing. A good programmer or a software engineer is able to take that code and refactor it. And they get to make a different version of that code that does the same thing and yet is much more readable, much more maintainable, and much more flexible. So one example could be that instead of doing it all in the if-then else statements, which is all programming, you did it all in data, which means that maybe you have an array that represents the state of the board and the move that needs to be done for every state of the board. That's a little bit more flexible because your data can be changed. Your if-then-else statements can't be changed. Once they're in the code, that's it when you run it. But your data, you could adapt over time. So you could just have a huge data bank, basically, of every possible layout of the board and the next step to do, depending on the side. And then your program would simply be really short and simple. Instead of a bunch of if-then-else statements, all it's going to do is that for each element in that, find the matching board configuration in my database, and then do the move that's specified for that board configuration. So your program just went from like this huge thing that has like tons of lines of code to like this really short program that's just processing some data and then spitting out the next move. So that's an example of one, step above just like the most rudimentary programming. And if you're tracking with me, then you are understanding what I'm saying about why it's better.
Because I've done that before. Okay. Where you're writing like 200, 300 lines and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I could have done this in 20.
Right? Yeah. To answer your bigger question, at the end of the day, I love programming, I love engineering, and they kind of go hand in hand. There's a spectrum for them. I think that once you understand their essences, you know why you have to practice both. It's great to be a master programmer, but you have to kind of be able to engineer your software to make it dependable and useful and stuff like that, depending on what you're trying to do in the software world, right?
Right, and like kind of apply it. It's almost like programming is like the tool, and then like engineering is like how well do you know how to use that tool, kind of thing.
Maybe that's the way to put it. Yeah.
Actually, that was very insightful. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Because as you were talking about like how you develop as an engineer at Amazon, like that question popped in my head. I was like, wait, wouldn't you be developing as a programmer at Amazon?
Or what's the difference?
No, yeah, right? And then that kind of like got me thinking about like, oh wait, what is really the difference between those two? So yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
All right, you're welcome.
I was learning. Yeah, so that's probably going to be the title of this episode.
What's the difference
between engineering and programming? Or developing as an engineer versus developing as a programmer?
That could be a good episode title.
All right. Well, hope you enjoyed that. I actually learned something from this guy. So I hope you guys learned something too.
I had fun too, because these things are not explicit. They just kind of get drawn out in the conversation.
Yeah. for sure.
So,
Yeah, hope you liked this episode. Leave a like. Let us know what you guys want us to talk about next, and we'll hope to see you in the next episode.
see ya.
Yep.
Subscribe here.
Yeah. Big button.